Welcome to Public Forum, a community outreach program produced at North Idaho College on the shores of Lake Coeur d'Alene. Featuring guests from around the globe addressing a wide variety of subjects, Public Forum serves to educate and enlighten. Please join host and moderator, political scientist Tony Stewart, in welcoming today's guest.
This year marks the 100th anniversary of the 4-H clubs in America, and so it's our purpose today and again next week to have a 2-week series about this very important organization, what it's done for many young people in the history of the last 100 years. In order to accomplish that purpose, we welcome to the program, first of all, Mr. Jim Wilson. He is with the University of Idaho Area Extension as an educator with the 4-H youth. Mr. Wilson, welcome to the program. We're so pleased to have you here.
Thank you for inviting us.
And I'm equally pleased to welcome to the program Charlotte Wilson, no relation to our other guest, but she is associated with the University of Idaho's 4-H program assistant, and so Ms. Wilson, welcome to the program. We're so happy you can be with us these 2 weeks also.
Thank you.
And as always, I'm so pleased to have Janelle Burke, who's our regular panelist, and she will commence the questioning today as we look into the 100th anniversary of the 4-H clubs.
Jim, my first question is going to be directed to you, but I have to first share with our viewers that I was a member of 4-H too when I was growing up, and had a calf, and also did some sewing and did some cooking and participated in some activities. But the 4-H now is going to be celebrating its 100th year. It must have started in about 1902 or 1903. Can you tell us a little bit about how it started?
Basically, it started out initially with individuals with the university trying to do outreach to the people within the different rural areas, because back in 1902, obviously, things were much more rural than they are nowadays. And part of the university's outreach is they had focused back in 1867 developing land-grant universities, but oftentimes people couldn't make the reach or the drive or the commute to get to the land-grant university. So extension is a way of doing that. They basically started out with some boys and girls clubs that focused on, in boys clubs it was often corn clubs, and the girls clubs usually started with canning and doing that to try and teach better methods of production, agriculture, or food safety at an early beginning of the program.
Well, it's come a long way. Charla, compare what used to be the programs with what the programs are today.
Well, I've actually been a 4-H'er myself, and now I'm currently leading the 4-H program, and we've gone a long ways. Now no longer is it strictly cooking and sewing and raising livestock, but there's also computer and drama and a whole variety of projects that an individual can be involved in.
So it's a learning experience now that is very broad, actually.
Yes.
And I have one other question. How is a 4-H club set up? What is the structure for a 4-H club?
4-H clubs can vary based upon what the needs of the individuals within that group are. In Kootenai County, a primary structure tends to be a community club, individuals within a given area often coming together. They do some programs in developing some leadership skills amongst youth, and also work as far as doing some community pride activities, along with then doing their traditional projects such as livestock or foods, or as Charlotte mentioned, things such as computer or photography or wildlife. So it's quite varied based upon their needs.
And in each one of those clubs there's some adult leadership too, isn't there, Charlotte?
Yes, there is. There's an organizational leader who oversees the runnings of the entire club, and there are also project leaders who lend their expertise and their knowledge and their time to teach the youth specific projects or specific project topics.
With that, I want to pursue what Janelle has been asking about the history of the organization. And I'm sure we have many viewers watching that in this last 100 years, at some point along this way, they have been involved in, as you have, within 4-H, or maybe they have young people in their families today. As she said, 100 years ago, this was set up, and I believe I am correct, am I not, that this was set up across the United States at the county level. Counties were pretty much involved. Is that correct, Charlotte?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Each county has the extension to service their area.
And they can continue to do that
yes.
today. Now, in some years past, there was I don't know what to call the person, the chief representative or of the whole program in the county. Is it still organized in that way, or has it been changed in its structural organization?
There has been some changes. It used to be the extension agent.
Right, they call it an agent.
Yes. Now they've changed to educators, and they tend to have more of a focus area. So Jim is our youth 4-H extension. There's agriculture extension agent, extension educators. There's livestock, family consumer sciences are all different areas that you'll find extension educators in now.
But if we're talking about a more isolated, small rural county, when they have very limited resources, would you just have one person serving all those functions in that county?
What you may see now is you'll have 1 or 2 people within that county, and then outside counties or neighboring counties will have varying educators, and they will share responsibilities between the counties.
So they have a larger regional coverage.
Yes.
Jim, a question to you, because again, structurally it gets confusing, and University of Idaho, of course, being a land grant university, and different states, Washington State University is a land grant in the state of Washington. So universities are involved in this. Have they always been involved, or has this been something in more recent years they've come in to assist the counties in this program?
Actually, Extension was an outreach of the land-grant universities.
From the very beginning?
From the very beginning, that's correct. As far as on doing that one, basically back land-grant universities, and then there are also some of the 1890 institutions as well that came in later into play, but were all part of the Extension outreach to the communities.
Follow-up, all organizations go through evolution and some change. When it was set up 100 years ago, and you said through the land-grant universities, and it concentrated on what we've already identified, such as livestock and canning and sowing. So it was an organization that was focused on agriculture, which also would mean the rural areas. It would not be a central city or large city program. Now that you've expanded, as Charlotte's talked about, into some other areas, do you serve youth in the cities as well as in agricultural rural areas?
Certainly we do, Tony. And in fact, probably in about, I think it was 1967, the percentage of urban to rural youth numbers and participants within the 4-H program were about equal. Yet, because of the roots that 4-H has, is oftentimes it's perceived as you must be involved in agriculture or live on a farm to be able to participate in the 4-H program, which certainly has evolved much further than that today.
So if you're talking about the year 1967, we're up to 2003, would a majority of the youth in 4-H actually be in urban areas rather than in rural areas?
That's correct. Actually, I pulled some of the numbers
Would
from
you
our last
please
USDA 237 for Idaho for this past year, and actually 16.4% of the youth classified themselves as living on a farm. 62.3% felt that they were classified as living in a town under 10,000 population, 11.3% in towns less than 50,000, and 10% in urban areas or cities over 50,000. So certainly we have a lot more in the smaller towns and in urban type of settings actually than what we do even within the farm program.
Since we're still, in many ways, a rural state, of those cities over 50,000, we're talking that 10% is mostly in Boise, I would assume.
Right, and that would be basically the Boise area.
All right.
That's correct.
We don't have a lot of cities over 50,000. Charlotte, back to you and in relation to this process, since this has had really a major change, but reaching out and being inclusive to youth in different ways, could you be a little more specific as you're serving in Idaho? And I assume Idaho is very similar to other states in your mission and service. Could you just, although we've identified some of those services, could you just kind of take us through the entire scope of the kind of programs and the kind of projects that the youth are involved in? That's a big order.
That's a big order, yes. The youth are involved. They start out in their clubs, so they learn hands-on education is what 4-H focuses on.
Let me interrupt. Say, is there a certain starting age?
We have a Cloverbud program, which includes those members that are 5 to 8 years old. It's a non-competitive social learning activity for them. Then we have what is known as the traditional, or is perceived as traditional 4-H, which are members who are 8 up to 18. And they start in their club. They can choose projects that they'd be interested in. The club also focuses a lot on doing community service activities. where they are going to senior citizens' homes and sharing a day with them, or collecting food for the food bank. Any number of projects so they're learning civic responsibility and duties. And it just kind of grows from there as far as how much that youth wants to do, that member would like to do. There's several state functions that they can go to. There's a Know Your Government conference, which was held over President's Day weekend, where they learn about their government and actually get to do mock legislative sessions and mock judicial sessions.
Now, that's all over the country, not just Idaho. Would that be correct?
Many states do that.
Okay.
I know Washington as well as Idaho and several other states do that. If they really enjoy that, they can go on to the national level and do the Citizenship Washington Focus, where they go to Washington, D.C. and learn similar things about their government. There's, in the state, there's several things such as Teen Conference for them to go and learn more about projects or community service and interact with youth from all over the state. And that, again, is something that many states do.
Thank you very much. Janelle?
I want to give Jim an opportunity to tell about the values of 4-H, because I think that's a long-standing tradition, the values.
Certainly, the 4-H has always held that it's very important, even within our projects that we do, that the member is the most important aspect of the learning process. We use tools such as animals, photography, whatever, as a mechanism to teach youth development, helping them to learn to develop skills that will certainly make them productive and contributing members of our society.
And there's a 4 H's. Can you tell us what those are?
Certainly. They're head, hands, heart, and health.
And and expound a little bit on that.
Okay.
Each one of those, or Charlotte can, whichever.
Okay, I'm doing
that. The head stands for learning more knowledge. The heart is the love of people working with other people. Hands is for service, to do community service or to better your community through the work of your hands. And the health is learning to be a healthy person, whether it's through good nutrition or good actions and good choices.
Now, I have to just ask, because there is a certain time of the year that's very exciting for people who are in 4-H, and that's fair time. And so I know you want to talk a little bit about that competitiveness that goes on at fair time, and some of the activities, like the livestock auction, I think, is an offshoot of that.
Certainly. There are a number of things, obviously. Fair tends to be a culmination of a lot of the individuals' work within the 4-H program. And it gives an opportunity for them to show an exhibit and be evaluated on how they have progressed towards a set of standards. We don't compare them one against another, but they're really competing against themselves and to do the best job that they possibly can. Now, certainly we have the 4-H building, which deals with a lot of the non-livestock issues, and then we also have what probably more people tend to see or be more readily available at fairs and seeing is truly the livestock, such as the rabbits and the goats and sheep and those type of programs. The livestock sale itself was an offshoot of providing an opportunity for youth to market their animals to the public, and also an opportunity for the public to provide some support back to the youth in recognition of the type of work that they're doing and focusing on raising a quality animal, but also for being actively involved in things that help develop leadership, citizenship, and certainly help them become better members of their community.
I'm thinking of the entire population as you do and how you serve them well. A number of the young people, of course, they come from families where financially the parents can be supportive of having animals on the place or to provide them other resources. But particularly in the urban areas where young people may come from, in some cases, very low income and they have no funds. And Charlotte, I'll start with you. How does this organization help those individuals be able to receive through some kind of financial support what they need to carry out their project, particularly if they want to deal with something that it costs some funds for them to carry their project out?
We try to focus on not so much that it has to be like if you were to go and buy a horse, it doesn't have to be the high dollar horse at the end. You can use any horse that you can come across. So we don't focus so much on that it is the premium quality, but that you're learning the most from the project. So if you have a sewing project, It's not that you went out and bought the most costly material, but it's that you learned how to sew correctly and learned the skills. And we try to keep the program cost itself as low as possible, requiring that the kids only pay for their materials out front, which is a low cost of $11 for the year, and they get all their materials through that. So there's not a big outlay of cash initially for an individual to be involved, and that is a problem with the family does have financial problems with that. There are some ways that we can help them go around that.
So there are some, and I
Yes.
assume that there's some generous people who contribute funds when,
Yes.
when they know there's certain needs.
And then again, there's also scholarships that are available. So
Okay.
if they do want to go on a trip, that they don't have to pay out all the cash. There's scholarships, both local, state, and national, that they can receive.
Jim, let's talk about funding. We've not mentioned that at all for the salaries of your people and what Charlotte has talked about, scholarships. Can you just break down for us the sources of your funds across America, where the 4-H, how it operates financially?
The 4-H program is, obviously, as we mentioned, part of the extension, which is part of USDA, United States Department of Agriculture.
Right.
There are federal funds that come to each of the states
Through those
through the
grant.
USDA allocations to the grant universities,
Okay.
at which point in time some are allocated towards research programs and some are allocated towards extension-based programs. Some of those dollars combined with state support often is used in most states anyway, as far as in funding faculty salaries or those that are direct employees of the University of Idaho, such as myself. There is some small portion of my salary, though, that is also generated through the county. So it's actually the cooperative extension, which we were talking about, is really a three-legged partnership between state, federal, and counties on doing that. Those individuals in county positions, obviously, are funded through the county, as are some of our secretarial support staff and also county operation budgets.
Then how do you budget-wise set up for those generous people who contribute funds, like for scholarships and all? Do you have some particular fund that where those are deposited or do you ever do any fundraisers? Or
Yes, we do a number of different things as far as in helping to try and generate some funds for support. Obviously, we do some direct solicitation to individuals, and actually the Leaders Association, there's usually a Leaders Association in each county that can funnel those monies through and help as far as in managing those funds and also the distribution of those funds on doing that. So we have our County Leaders Association that do fundraising activities for awards, scholarships, those types of things. We also established about in 1997 a county endowment fund similar to our state endowment, where individuals can directly contribute to that one. Those funds also can be used to help support local programs.
my next question before I go back to Janelle is that you and I talked on the phone in preparing for this program, and for this past year, a year for you, is it a calendar year? Or?
Actually, our 4-H program year in Idaho runs October 1st through September 30th.
Okay. Based on that 12-month period, share with us how many people in this year are enrolled in the 4-H program in this state.
Okay. This past year, in the state, there was approximately 28,600 youth involved in different aspects of 4-H programs.
In a state with about 1.25 million people, that's a significant number, isn't it?
That certainly is from that standpoint. As we break that down more into our local area, we had 816 youth that actually participated in our community or project-related clubs this past year.
When you say local, you're speaking
right,
of
with Kootenai County.
Kootenai County.
Right. Actually, it's Kootenai and Shoshone counties.
Right.
There are 2 counties in the state of Idaho that do not have an extension office located, Shoshone County and Boise County were 2 that when they originally developed the extension programs within Idaho, there were not county offices established in there, so we service those individuals.
So Kootenai serves Shoshone, and then Boise County is
actually served by Gem County.
Okay.
On doing that. So we had 816 within Kootenai Shoshone 4-H programs this past year. We also had another 137 youth that were involved in some school enrichment programs where we've been working and trying to partner with the schools and providing them with some educational resource materials, especially in science and technology, that seem to be very helpful, and some areas that teachers have found very useful needs for doing that. Plus, we also reach some additional youth through some of our other programs. And again, we talk about 4-H, but it's actually 4-H and youth development as a whole. And through things such as the expanded or extension nutrition program and that, we're also reaching other youth that may not be perceived as traditional 4-H members or members of the 4-H program, as most people would commonly think of them in that club setting.
Janelle Berg.
You have some programs that were in place for the 100th anniversary. We started out our program talking about the 100th anniversary, and for those persons who might have tuned in late, what kinds of special programs did you have to commemorate the 100th anniversary of the 4-H programs in America?
As always, we have our fair, and that was, as a commemorative, you see fair's been traditionally part of 4-H. On the national level, they've had some extra programming that has occurred through the National 4-H Council back in Chevy Chase, Maryland. And this year we have a recognition banquet each year for our leaders to recognize leaders and members both, and that was also, we worked that into our commemorative program.
Now I have to ask a question for both of you, and either one of you, as you think of people who might have done well who have been in the 4-H program. I'll bet you can think of some people, maybe people who are famous, but maybe people who just aren't famous, but they kind of got their start in 4-H. Can you think of someone who's done well?
Well, there's some individuals that come to mind. Orville Redenbacher was certainly a 4-H member. Reba McIntyre has been involved in 4-H. And there actually are a number of individuals that they've established through the National 4-H Hall of Fame of recognizing those individuals that had their initial roots in the 4-H program that certainly have gone on to be well recognized nationwide.
So there is a 4-H Hall of Fame,
Yes.
too. And can you think of some people, maybe someone locally, a kid who started out and was maybe needing a little extra help and has really blossomed through the 4-H program?
Well, I'm probably kind of at a disadvantage to answer that question. Is through my eyes, I've grown up through it, and I can tell you leaders, the Booth family, who lives over in Post Falls, has been very involved in 4-H, and all of the family has grown up through that. My family, my grandma and grandpa were leaders and have recognition through that, as well as my parents were both leaders. So a lot of it becomes, if you think about it, you probably know someone directly that has been involved in 4-H or that 4-H has touched their lives.
And I know, as a young person myself, the leader was very important. We went to her house, and it was a very big event in the summertime. That was something that took up the better part of a day, I believe, in my recollection is. It was very important. And so, do people still go to the leader's house or to some place for the meeting, and then they proceed through the summer, of course, to develop their project?
Yeah. The community clubs are still very focused on either a leader or a member hosting their meetings, and a lot of times it'll travel around. So you may be at one member's house 1 month and another member's house next month, but it's very much of that atmosphere where you're doing it out of someone's home and visiting and being part of that small group.
Another question that arises, thinking about how broad perspective this program has all over the country and in both rural and urban, but it brought a question to mind, and that is that there is a young woman or a young man who lives in the core city that is in a very large city. They've never been outside of concrete. And they would love to go to a farm. They have interest in agriculture and animals and all. Is there anything in your program where those individuals they're financially not able to, their parents to do it, do you have anything in your program that can get them in touch with what Thomas Jefferson always talked about, a rich agricultural country and the roots that is in the soil? Do you have anything for that?
Certainly we do, Tony, from that standpoint. First of all, oftentimes in some of the inner cities, they actually even have community gardening programs where they can do some things in vacant lots, and have developed those even in the most urban settings of Philadelphia, New York City, and that. But there also are some interstate and intrastate exchanges that 4-H programs do to enable individuals from one county to go to another county and visit, and vice versa, allow those people to have that exchange as far as not only what types of projects or that they're involved with, but also to learn to understand through another person's eyes what their particular circumstances are and how they can better understand and relate to other people.
So are they host families, for example, like international students, there'll be host families that they'll stay with for a year and go to their senior year in this country. So Charlotte, are there host families where a young person can come to the city and spend a week or a month or something on a farm?
Yeah, that's how all of the 4-H programming is set up, is that you're a host family, whether it's like we're talking about city to city or state to state, and we also do that on the national and international level as well. So yeah, you'd be staying with a host family and just becoming part of that family for the duration of your stay.
So even some students go to other countries. It's another kind of international exchange program.
Yes, we have the International 4-H Youth Exchange Program and the Labo program, which is an exchange between the United States and Japan, where you would stay either a year, 6 months, 3 months, or for a couple of weeks with a different family.
And all of this process is organized through, again, in each state through this structure you have set up. And so but you have different educators now dealing with different parts of the program.
Yes.
And in your role, obviously yours and Jim's is different, but you also, I assume, coordinate together and have other people that are involved across the state of Idaho.
Yes. I'm dealing with a lot of the day-to-day activities of the 4-H, while Jim deals with it on a broader scope, and then the state oversees even each county itself.
On that note, we have to bring today's program to conclusion, but for our viewers, the good news is that if you have, and I'm sure you do, further interest in the 4-H program, we're going to be back next week with the same two guests, and we're going to kind of shift focus. Certainly it's about celebrating the 100th anniversary of the 4-H Clubs of America, but we want to talk a little more about what does it do for young women and young men, what does it do to their value system, and how do they progress. And then there are some new future plans as this organization continues to expand in its services, and those are the things that we shall bring to you next week. Again, to Jim Wilson and Charlotte Wilson, thank you both for being with us today. We've enjoyed very much this interview, and we congratulate you on being part of an organization that's now 100 years old.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please be with us again next week. Until then, please have a good week. I am Tony Stewart.
Recorded on the campus of North Idaho College, Public Forum is the longest-running in-house college production on PBS. Each episode is pre-recorded live and is an educational outreach from North Idaho College. Please join us at this same time next week for another edition of Public Forum on this public television station. Welcome to Public Forum, a community outreach program produced at North Idaho College on the shores of Lake Coeur d'Alene. Featuring guests from around the globe addressing a wide variety of subjects, Public Forum serves to educate and enlighten. Please join host and moderator, political scientist Tony Stewart, in welcoming today's guest.
We're so happy to continue our discussion from last week and therefore make it a 2-week series on the 100th anniversary of the 4-H Clubs of America. And on last week's program, we talked about its early history and its organization and the functions and how that has expanded over time. On today's program, we're going to talk very much on a focus of dealing with what does that do with the values of young people and how it helps them to learn responsibility. And secondly, to talk about the future of the program as we move into the second 100 years of that program. I'm very pleased to welcome the program from last week. Back again is Jim Wilson with the University of Idaho Area Extension as an educator for 4-H and youth. And Jim, we enjoyed the program last week, and thank you for taking time to be with us again.
Thank you.
And equally, we're so pleased to have Charlotte Wilson, who is with the Kootenai County Extension and also the University of Idaho, working with others such as Mr. Wilson and her title is 4-H Program Assistant. And Charlotte, welcome back. We're pleased to continue our celebration and discussion of an important organization in our country.
Thank you.
And as always, I'm so pleased to have Janelle Burke, who is our regular panelist, and she shall commence today's questioning with our two guests.
Thank you, Tony. My first question today is going to be for Charlotte, and I'm going to ask you to tell our viewers what 4-H stands for.
4-H, in its motto, is to make the best better, and its pledge is for your head, heart, health, and hands, which are the 4-H's. And the goal and mission of 4-H is to improve youth through development and teaching them life skills.
Now, you talked about 4-H's, and can you tell about each one of those particular items, the head, the heart, the hands, and the health?
The head stands for improving knowledge through education. The heart is for compassion, responsibility, and love towards yourself and others. Your hands are for better living, your hands for community service or for learning how to get a job done. And your health is to learn about your health and how to be a healthy person, whether it's through improved methods of doing something or making better decisions.
This is essentially a youth program, if I understand correctly, Jim. And so one of the things that we are talking about are the values that 4-H can impart to youth, responsibility, accountability. Can you talk about some of those values that you hope to impart?
Certainly, Janelle. What we hope to enable individuals to do is to develop those life skills, as Charlotte mentioned, that would help them to be able to make the transition from youth to adulthood and be a contributing member of society on doing that one. Again, we do it through a number of mechanisms, the projects, and developing that. Actually, there's 64 life skills that we hope to develop within youth. In
Wow.
each project and activity, hopefully is developing one or two of those skills as they work through the program on doing that.
Can you mention a couple of those skills?
There's things obviously as decision-making skills, self-esteem, being trustworthy, being respectful of others. Again, things that hopefully we would all hope to develop, but sometimes in the past 4-H program, we've hoped that maybe that's happened through the process, which I think we've been very successful in, but it hasn't really been a focus of that. A lot of our new educational materials really focus on developing and keying in on certain life skills and the development of those life skills through each activity that they do.
One of the things that you often hear is that 4-Hers don't get into trouble. Maybe it's because they're busy, I don't know, but can one or the other of you speak to that?
Well, from our experience, certainly within Kootenai County, I would have to say the vast majority, in fact, I can't think of an incident of anything in the last 18 years that I've been here in Kootenai County of a 4-H member that has been in any type of serious trouble. One of the things that really impressed upon me early on in my career was a friend of mine in Oregon who was actually a district court judge in Crook County by the name of Dick Hoppus. And he said one of the reasons that he chose to get involved in 4-H and continues to do that one is that in all the years that he has served on the bench, not once has a 4-H youth ever come before him. And so, again, that speaks well of the 4-H program, not only in Kootenai County, but throughout the country.
I'd have to agree with your assumption that a lot of it's that you're staying busy. You're doing productive things with your extra time instead of being out on the streets causing trouble. And I attest that that's probably what kept me out of trouble a lot of times, is that I was busy. I was involved with the 4-H program doing constructive things with my time.
That's a record that hardly any organization could meet. It's remarkable, and I know we're not leaving the message with the viewers that there's not a single young person in America that's in 4-H that's never had a problem, but it is it's very commendable that it has a great effect. You mentioned that there are 64 skills that are promoted by your organization. When a young person comes in, particularly very young, at 10 or 8 and stays till they're 18, that gives a lot of years in which to work and develop. Do those young people, if they stay with the program, wind up in projects or in classes or wherever where they will be introduced to all 64 skills?
Through either the project sessions, community service activities, or a wide variety of things, through a 10 or 12-year program, they will come in contact with those or have opportunities. And what we try to do is to develop those life skills rather than just teach a life skill, but they actually get to experience that. And that's one of the unique things about 4-H, and again, the learning by doing, the hands-on, because obviously they'll learn and retain much more of what they're actively engaged in rather than just hearing or listening to somebody talk about that.
That is a very, very important teaching tool. At the higher education level, in a lot of the social sciences in particular, you have a mixture of mediums that you use for teaching, and one, of course, is the lecture, and there are seminars and there are reports, but there's something that was created a number of years ago in a very extensive way of simulations, where you have mock trials or you have a presidential campaign, wherever it is, and students feedback the idea that once they have role play, they retain a much higher percentage than if they simply listen to a lecture, although that can be important, of course, or reading, which is also important. So that, Charlotte, I'll come to you on this one. Do you think that is one of the factors that is so successful, is that in all of these situations they have to actually be active in applying these principles or ideas in some kind of project?
Yes, I would say that's definitely one of 4-H's strong points, is that they're actually involved in doing it instead of just passively involved in the project or activity. And another thing is that they get to choose where their focus area is, so they can be involved in things that interest them through the projects, and through that learn those life skills.
So it makes them more passionate about it, or focused if it's something they're most interested in.
Yes.
Now, we don't want to leave the impression, though, that even though that's the heart of it, that is that they have to actually do projects, have to do activities, but certainly it's important for them to have literature or to have teaching tools given to them so they know how that all applies. It's my understanding that as they do these projects, at the conclusion there's some kind of report, so that would bring in the written part of it. Is that correct?
Yes, each member usually keeps some type of a record, and again, it's a way for them to look back and gauge their growth over the past project year and what they've been able to accomplish. And a lot of our new curriculum that we're utilizing as well helps to track and develop some and track that growth as well within the particular area that they're learning as they go along. I think one of the other things that we encourage, certainly that is a very valuable life skill in the area of communication, is that each project they do some sort of an oral report or presentation for that project. And starting at age 8 and 9, by the time they get to 18 or 19, we've had a number of speech teachers in high school say, we can easily tell which youth have been involved in 4-H program. They're not white knuckle on the podium when they have to get up in front of a group to speak.
I assume that their presentation will be more organized and
Certainly.
Structured. So there's both some experience in written form and in oral form too.
Yes.
Janelle Berg.
On last time's program, we talked a little bit about the progress of the 4-H program over the last 100 years, and now I want to shift and focus a little bit on the programs in the years to come. One of the things that's happened is the kinds of programs that are offered through the 4-H are different than they were a long time ago. And so let's start with Jim and tell us, what are some of the different programs now that are offered, and how are they different? In other words, I think now boys and girls are both probably in cooking programs instead of having just girls in the program and boys in the livestock or something of that nature. But tell us how some of those things are different and what you foresee for the future.
Certainly, you're correct that things have obviously evolved over the last 100 years and within our society, and changes within the family structures as well as to what individuals have chosen to become involved with. But we certainly have gone to the standpoint of including things like drama, computers, advances even in some of the woodworking, some of the environmental sciences as well, that as we learn more information, again, part of our educational outreach from the university to the 4-H member is to help translate that information so they can become more aware and make better decisions, or at least informed decisions as they go along. And just as things have changed over the last 100 years, even though we have some of our traditional programs in livestock and gardening and that, but we've changed and evolved those, we're going to continue to evolve those programs as we move forward and as our society changes.
And the membership in those programs have changed too, haven't they, Charla?
Yes, you see a wide variety of members in every aspect of the projects that you see. it's boys and girls mixed together doing cooking and learning how to decorate cakes or do childcare. You see girls that are doing the forestry and the shooting sports and the livestock projects. So you see a wide variety of kids involved in each area of the 4-H program.
And you're going to continue to see that evolve, I'm taking it.
Oh yes, I'm sure that we've lost a lot of the class system that we used to think of girls' jobs and boys' jobs. Now they're everyone's jobs.
Now, when we started the 4-H program, it was very involved with the land, with hoping to teach people who were living in rural areas about good health, and doing that by teaching the children good health, good agricultural methods. Still, a good portion of your funding comes from the United States Department of Agriculture, the USDA. But in what ways do you foresee that agriculture in this country is going to change? In what ways is the 4-H program keeping up with those changes that agriculture across the spectrum is seeing?
I think there obviously are a number of changes in agriculture, and certainly as we see difference in cropping and livestock management programs, and that will adapt those changes within to our 4-H curriculum. But also within USDA, they have the family and child unit of USDA that deals with 4-H, that we're also looking at those aspects of it as well and making sure that we meet those needs, because obviously what happens in agriculture does have impacts, whether it be in the areas of food and nutrition and health and those types of things that we need to be aware of as well.
So you're teaching them not just to follow whatever it might be that they've learned in the past, but the very latest, newest methods. Is that correct?
That's correct. And in fact, that was part of the reason that 4-H was initially developed in the Boys and Girls Clubs back in the early 1900s, was that oftentimes youth would be willing to try some new things, and mom or dad might be a little bit hesitant to do that, but no, they'd set aside a small acreage or that their child could do something, or they let their daughter at that point do some different types of canning, and they found out that suddenly those things were working a lot better than the practices they had been employing, so they started picking up and adopting those practices.
So follow up, and I'll start with Charlotte on that. I hear Jim saying in his answer, this just came to mind with your answer, and that is, we think of parents teaching their children as they grow up, which they do, of course, certain skills and behavior styles. But I hear you saying here that in some cases the youth who are in these programs are getting such valuable information that they're taking that home and teaching their parents to change in some ways to, like maybe canning or sewing or whatever it may be. Would you respond to that approach? How some experience when you as one member of the 4-H club yourself at one point, youth teaching their adults. That was certainly seeing that with computers. Almost every parent I talk to says, I am so ashamed to admit that my children are so far ahead of me and they're teaching me how to use a computer. So is that something similar in 4-H?
Yes, a lot of it is that the youth get the information for these new skills. When I was in 4-H, I did a food preservation project. And so through the information I was getting and using, my mother was also learning what the newest and latest techniques were for the food preservation, or with the livestock side of it, what new feeding techniques and management techniques are used. The kids learn those, and then the parents learn it via the kids as well still.
And you mentioned earlier in the other program that with your program, you're moving into some technology too areas. So even there'd be even probably more advanced teaching the youth because at a very early age they're used to that technology. I'll just have a quick footnote. I did a program some years ago with a school district here in Idaho, and I went into the classroom to do some of the research and taping, and they had second grade students on computers, and they found that teaching them their vocabulary and their spelling and mathematics was escalating because the young children were so excited about using the computer and the screen. So you're seeing that in your program too?
Yes, we're definitely seeing that. There's a lot of interest in the depth that they can learn in those advanced areas.
Then that leads me to another question. Can one then conclude that because that's happening in two ways, and the parents are still teaching, of course, the children, does it create a more cohesive family?
Yes, 4-H definitely focuses on everyone in the family being involved, that mom and dad are very supportive of their child, regardless of what the project area is. So it's definitely a family-orientated program.
And Jim, you're finding the same thing.
Certainly, from that standpoint. I think the other component, and I think you mentioned that earlier, is the leaders on doing that one. And actually, oftentimes our adult volunteer leaders are working and learning with the kids as well. And that's some of the things that they say keep them energized, is wanting to be involved in the 4-H program. And probably if there was a limitation that we have within our existing program, is with a number of parents working and doing that, is finding volunteers that would like to come and share their expertise and knowledge and their love of learning with youth. We always have youth that would certainly love to be involved. Sometimes our limitation becomes that adult volunteer partnership.
You indicated that this past year you had 28,600 youth in the state of Idaho, and again, we're a small state in population. Do you have any idea on statistics of those young people, how many of those that the parents were involved in some way? Parents are very busy, and it's very difficult economically, and so a lot of parents, both parents work, and some of them work 2 jobs, and they just don't have free time. They're trying to make a financially secure home. Is that increasing or decreasing the role of parents with the youth in the 4-H from their own parents?
I would say possibly the amount of time, and again, I don't have any hard data to back that up. I would say the amount of time maybe that they are being able to spend because of those maybe has been somewhat diminished, but I think that the parents still are interested and focused in spending quality time with their children as far as on doing that and being supportive. I think the one component we take a look at in some of the 8 essential things for youth and development is the standpoint of having a partnership or knowing that there's at least one caring adult in their life, and oftentimes that's a factor that certainly prevents even suicides and that within our society. And if the parent's working and heavily busy, by having at least that partnership either with a project leader or organizational leader or another parent of a 4-H member within their club, oftentimes that provides a lot of that cohesiveness and strength.
I would suggest, because we are in an economic and technological world in which parents are more busy, that you've just given a very strong justification for the 4-H club for the next 100 years that's needed more now than ever. With that, I turn to Janelle Burt.
Well, one of the things that is happening is that one can no longer just be a farmer with limited skills. One has to be a skilled farmer, and he has to know about technology and a number of other things. Is 4-H a way to provide that information? And I'll turn to Jim first for that.
I think that there's certainly ways that we can do that to help in providing some of that background information. Oftentimes in dealing with the youth, though, we're looking at some of the very beginning and helping to establish that groundwork, where in today's agriculture, a lot of it is extremely highly technical on doing that one with field representatives and that they work with as far as adult farmers. But it can provide some background, if nothing else, a better understanding and a base with which to build upon.
And so they'll go forward from this point when they reach that age of majority and want to go forward.
Certainly from that standpoint, or certainly the number of family farms and that have been decreasing nationwide. That's been a trend for a number of years. If nothing else, if they move into other sectors of our society on doing that, at least they'll have an understanding of what's really going on. Am I able to discern fact from speculation as far as on that, and help to make better informed decisions and obviously better support our society.
And gardening.
Certainly.
Raising their own things. Now I want to give Charlotte an opportunity to say, how can people get involved? If they want to get involved in the 4-H program, how do they do that? And not just thinking about Kootenai County, but across the state and across in the other states that we go out to, Washington, Oregon, other parts of Idaho. Can you tell us how you would get in touch with those programs?
The easiest way to get in touch through 4-H is to contact your county extension office, and they'll be able to connect you with local clubs that will be able to meet your needs.
And so that's for the children?
That's for the children. Leaders as well. If you're an adult that would like to volunteer your time, you can also contact the extension office, and they can help you become involved, either through special events or through becoming involved in a club.
And if I'm just a person who doesn't necessarily want to be a leader, and I don't have any children who are likely to be involved, but I want to be supportive of 4-H, there are some ways I can do that too, and how are those?
We have what's called a resource leader, who is an individual who would just supply specific information, or you can contribute your time or financially make contributions through your county to support that program.
and of course keeping in touch with the newspaper and that sort of thing for 4-H activities that occur from time to time, 4-H livestock shows or perhaps fairs and that kind of thing.
Yes, you can watch your newspaper. A lot of the counties now are developing websites. So if you yourself are technologically advanced enough, you can go visit them on the websites. And most counties have a county newsletter that they publish.
Thank you.
I hate to say this, but I think it's not going to be much longer to where probably you can't function without computer technology in this world. I hope I didn't depress anyone with that. Another question that I have in relation to that, do you take the young people from time to time on tours? Like I was thinking about a corporate executive could maybe give a lecture at the corporation about how it operates, or to a political leader and all. Do you do those? Is that another way that people could be contributors to the work of the 4-H?
A lot of the clubs will formulate activities like that. We have one club in Kootenai County who works hand in hand with their local volunteer fire department and city councils so that they can learn how meetings and how their city how their area runs. So,
and that's something else we haven't clarified today. Within a county, we're a rather large county in Idaho, that is, you don't just have one club, you have different clubs based upon interest, or do you have a limit or size to the clubs?
We have 40 different clubs in the county, 40 plus most of the time, and they'll vary in size from, they have to have a minimum of 5 members up to some very large clubs that we have that service larger areas. But to be in a club, their basic requirements is a minimum of 5 members and some leaders to help teach these kids.
They've done some real special things. I know in some of the human rights events in this county, 4-H club has presented something in a ceremonial way, the flag or whatever it might be. Jim, our time is somewhat limited on the program today. You recently, at least at the time we're taping this program at the end of January. You just returned from Boise. Is there anything else that you could share with us about those discussions? I know it was based upon the future and some plans that you may have.
Certainly. We just have gone and revisited our 4-H strategic plan, which we developed about a year ago, on doing that and really looking at what the issues are, what we need to be doing to better position ourselves for the future. Obviously, through some of the tough economic times we've had within state and nationally and locally as well, we've had to make some adjustments as far as in faculty and staffing and some cutbacks that direction. So we've looked at how we can realign what we're doing and do a more efficient job. That's where part of the area extension educator responsibility is covering a greater area and helping to provide some education has certainly been a benefit. One of the other things that has been fairly innovative in my perspective anyway is that the 5 northern counties in Idaho and 7 northeastern counties in Washington have come together about 3 years ago to form what we call the Inland Northwest 4-H Hub, where we started looking at sharing resources across state lines and doing that one to try and more effectively do a better job in meeting the needs of our clientele.
That makes lots of sense. Janelle Burke.
Well, 4-H has been around for a long time, and it's going to be around for a long time in the future, but is it expanding in terms of numbers? And I'll ask that question to Jim first.
Our numbers have been fairly steady, and at least within Kootenai County, we've been seeing a steady increase. We haven't seen rapid increases, and there have been some peaks and valleys that you go through on doing that one. But for the most part, we've seen a steady increase of 3 to 4% a year as far as within our enrollment, and also within our volunteer base, which is certainly a key component as to being able to advance those above and beyond.
Now, I want to ask Charla a question that just let's take one area and talk about how it has somewhat changed over the years. Let's take food preservation. You mentioned that earlier, and how it probably started out with canning, and then there was some freezing component to it. And what do you foresee in the future for something like that?
There'll always be some of the traditional type things, the freezing, the drying, and the canning, but I think a lot of what we'll see changing is the technique. As we become more knowledgeable about the bacteria and the safe handling practices, we'll see that changes through the 4-H program as well.
So when you talk about the product that you want to deliver, you're looking at what kinds of things? You're looking not just at putting the fruit in the jar, but at how it looks in the jar and the safety and the health aspects of it. What kinds of things would you be trying to teach someone about the food preservation?
Again, pretty much what you've touched on is that you're using a safe practice so that you're not going to have bacteria show up in it when you use it, that it has a good appearance, that your techniques are approved and safe.
And by techniques, you mean?
Whether you're doing, there's the different methods that we currently have, the water bath or the pressure, that you're using the right method for the right product. And just as technology goes, I really can't foresee what changes, not being super versed in that area. But as those change, those will be filtered down through the 4-H so that we're using the correct techniques for the correct food product that you would be preserving.
On that note, we must bring the program to conclusion. On behalf of Janelle Burke and our staff, I would like to thank Charla Wilson and Jim Wilson for sharing 2 weeks with us. It's been very, very informative, and you've been so cooperative in celebrating the 100th anniversary of the 4-H Clubs of America. We've talked about how it started, where it's gone, and where it may go in the future. And we very much were happy to set aside 2 weeks of this program to stop, pause, and recognize the importance of this 100 years. And thank you. Be with us again next week at the same time, and we'll interview another person. Until then, please have a good week. I am Tony Stewart.
Recorded on the campus of North Idaho College, Public Forum is the longest-running in-house college production on PBS. Each episode is pre-recorded live and is an educational outreach from North Idaho College. Please join us at this same time next week for another edition of Public Forum on this public television station.